Hi everyone, welcome to eLearnChat. We're talk, it's knowledge. And today we're going to talk and write. We're going to talk about writing, and we're going to talk about wonderful books. And right in the center position here, we've got John David Mann. He is the co-author of The Go-Giver and a new book called The Recipe with Chef Charles Carroll and a whole mess of other things. And to his right on screen here, we've got Lesley Price, our co-host, and she's with Learn Appeal. Take an eye on Learn Appeal, www.learnappeal.com. And aside from that, she is, and if you've been around as long as we have, the M Appeal of e-learning. That's a person who wears a catsuit and kicks. So just leave it at that. She's been in the e-learning community a long time in training and development, and she's done a little bit of everything, but she's with us, and we're glad to have her. So here's our intro. And we are back. Well, John, it is an absolute pleasure. I know your cohort, Bob Burg. I mean, we've talked 1,000 times, and Bob's a great guy. And finally, get to meet you almost in person. We've corresponded a lot in emails, but it's a pleasure meeting you. You've brought a lot of joy to our lives, and it's great to have you here and share you with our audience. And today you're talking to an audience that probably would really appreciate what you do, because this is a training, learning, development, and leadership audience. These are people who are involved in corporations or small companies, not that much in education in terms of 9 through 12 or K through 12, but people who, and a lot of leadership development type stuff. And your books are all about leadership development, life, getting ahead, success, and done in parables. And I just absolutely love your parables and the stories you do. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to finally meet you.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Trust me. Well, you just finished writing a wonderful book. It's called The Recipe with Chef Charles Carroll, and it's a great book. And I guess there's a subtitle, if you want to put it that, like The Ingredients for Success, or all about how, and really it's all about cooking and how cooking and how you cook affects your life, and how that applies to life. You've got the rules of cooking in the book, the rules of life, and they're very similar. How did you guys come about with that story?
You mentioned my cohort, Bob Burg, and I think for me one of the critical secrets to success in any endeavor is the business success anyway, or any success, is the partners you choose. I think the choice of a business partner is almost as critical as the choice of a marriage partner, for all the same reasons. Not all the same reasons. Bob has been amazing. I've partnered with Bob for over a decade now with these Go-Giver books. Can you believe it's been a decade?
I can't believe it. It's that long.
I can't believe it either. And because we were working together for long before that, it took a few years to get it to the marketplace. So our Go-Giver Odyssey is 12, 13 years old at this point. And Bob is a fantastic, wonderful partner. He is one of those guys who is in person when all the doors are shut and the windows are closed and it's just the two of us. Yeah. He's exactly what you think. He's exactly the same person.
Yeah.
He walks his talk.
What I would call in Scotland or in the UK, WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get.
What you get, exactly. So I've had the good fortune in my writing career to have a few excellent partners. Bob Burg is sort of primary. Another one is Brandon Webb, my former Navy SEAL sniper buddy, with whom I've written now 5 books. We're working on our 6th, which blows my mind. I never expected to be partnering with a Navy SEAL sniper, but I am. And Chef Charles Carroll is another one of those partners. It's a great partnership. This is our first book together. Hopefully not our last. The way that happened was that the second Go-Giver book, I guess, came out. Go-Givers Sell More. And well, no, I think it was the first book. First book came out. And back in 2009, I got a notice of an email from Charles, this chef I'd never heard of. I didn't know the culinary world. What do I know about that? My wife and I love to cook. We spend a lot of time in the kitchen, but I don't know the culinary world.
Yeah.
Get this email from an award-winning Olympian, 8-time Olympian chef who is executive chef of one of the busiest country clubs in the nation, saying, "Hey, I love the Go-Giver. I use it with my crew." So Charles's crew is, some 75 people or so in this gigantic country club. I was just there last week. That has 3 kitchens, 5 restaurants, and they host in the area of 800 events, banquet events, per week.
Per week?
It's like mind-blowing. So he's not just a chef, he runs this, empire. But when you go there, it's like it doesn't feel like a club or a kitchen or even a restaurant. It feels like a dojo. I mean, he runs it like he's developing the character of these young people. It's just magnificent. He's been about leadership and character development and the things that matter and working with young people ever since he was in his 20s himself. Yep. So he contacted me and said, "I love the Go-Giver, would love to do something with you sometime. I got this great idea for a book." Lesley, Rick, if I had a dime for every time I heard someone tell me, "I got a great idea for a book, we should do it together," I would be very wealthy. Yep. Usually that doesn't really, come to fruition, but in this case, he had a great idea for a story, and he had the basic underpinnings of the story, the basic shape of the story, and worked out in his mind and on paper. This young boy, this 14-year-old boy, who's just lost his father, and whose life is in trouble. It's spiraling down the drain. Grades are plummeting, getting in fights at school. His teachers are about to give up on him. He's headed for bad stuff. And he crosses paths with this crusty old retired diner chef and starts going to work for him in this tiny, cramped little kitchen that reminds me of the cantina in Star Wars. And in the course of that, learns these profound life lessons. It's kind of like Karate Kid meets Master Chef.
Yep.
And I loved that idea. Oh my God, I've got to do this book. He invited me out to the club, and I gave a talk about the Go-Giver at the club for the staff. And then that was in 2009. It took us 8 years to actually carve out the time where we could actually get this book written, and we finally did, and so here it is.
And you guys did a great job. We were talking earlier in the show, and even before you came on, Lesley and I were talking, that after reading the book, I have to admit, I had tears in my eyes. Several parts in the book had me pretty teary-eyed, but at the end, it stayed with me. The book stayed with me several weeks, and it's still with me. I only read it 2 weeks ago. I wanted to wait till we were close to the show with Chef Charles, so it was fresh. And actually, when we interviewed him, Lesley had finished reading, and I had about a third left to go, which I finished that night. And we didn't want to give the story away. We talked mostly about the beginning of the book because there's so much in the book that we didn't want to spoil it for anybody. But the book stayed with us, and Lesley and I were talking how it stayed with her, and we both recommended it to everybody. And we're going, well, it's not out yet, but when it's out, we'll give it to you. Whatever. We'll recommend it. And there aren't that many books that stay with people. I mean, they stay with you a day or two. And
me, John, as I said to you just before the start of the show, I taught in what we call in the UK vocational education or further education. I think what you call it in the US is community education. And I spent, a lot of the young people that came into the colleges, most of them were 16 when they came in. An awful lot of them hadn't done particularly well in school. They maybe hadn't done well in their exams, but they knew they wanted to do more, or maybe they were given encouragement from their parents or somebody else they knew that they wanted to do more. And part of what we did as lecturers, as teachers, was build their confidence. And it wasn't just about the vocational skills. An awful lot of it was life skills.
Yes.
And for me, I've got 2 big success stories. One of them was a lad that I taught when he was 16, when I was selling my house 2 years ago. this 38-year-old came round my house, and he was asking me all kinds of questions unrelated to the house. And then I mentioned something about the college, and he said, "I know, Mrs. Price, you were my teacher." And you know what? He put down a 50% deposit on my house. He had gone on and become a young entrepreneur.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love it. I love it.
And that's why your story is pretty much a real story. It can happen to anybody.
I love it. Somebody the other day asked me why I got into writing, because this wasn't my first career. You know, I started out as a concert cellist. I was a classical musician, and then I got into marketing, and I got into business, and I got into nutrition. I'm sort of a serial careerist. And somebody asked me, well, why did you get into this thing of writing? And originally, what led me into it is that I have a passion for words, for writing, and for what's on the page, for the shape of the story, the structure and the architecture, and the ideas in the story. All about the writing. I love the writing. What I've discovered that is the reason I do it, and that keeps me here, and it keeps me engaged, all the more so, is exactly what you just said. It's the people whose lives you touch. It's the people who send emails and say, you know, it was like you did, Rick. So I read the story, and it's 3 weeks later, and it stayed with me. And it's, I put a book out with my SEAL sniper friend a couple of months ago called The Killing School. You know, the most gentle humanitarian title, right? And it's a book about 4 special operations snipers and their life, where they came from, how they grew up, how they got trained, what it's like in the field. And I had a friend who read the book, and she said, you know, it changed my whole perspective on life and death, and I had a parent who's about to die, and it had this whole impact on her that I never imagined that book could have on someone. It's like, that is the juice of it. That's why we do what we do. It's because of those kinds of transformations that people come and tell us about.
But I think also it's interesting that you mention music, and you mention storytelling, and you mention marketing, because I think music tells a story. Marketing is certainly, I mean, my degree is in applied business economics and marketing. That's what I studied, and that's what I taught. And my love now is learning, and I can actually see an association between all three, believe it or not. I can see it. Sure.
Yeah, I think that, you know, my years in music completely informs my writing, and I understand what you're saying about marketing. You know, Seth Godin's book, All Marketers Are Liars. And he turns around the back cover and says, they're not really liars. I was lying. Really, all marketers are storytellers, or effective marketers, or storytellers. And so I think that makes complete sense.
So what got you from music to marketing to storytelling?
You know, I'm not sure. I have sort of, and forgive my background music, which is the thunder and lightning here in Florida. I have sort of 2 principles of success, if you will. One of them is to know that no one knows you better than yourself. No one knows your path the way you do. No one knows your gut the way you do. So you have to trust yourself, and trust your path, and trust your instinct, and trust your intuition. And the second principle is that you can't trust yourself. And that there are people, at least not completely, okay? Because there are people around you, there are people in your life who know you in some ways better than you do. And the universe that surrounds you knows you in every way better than you do. So there is tremendous importance to self-knowledge and to self-confidence and to listening to your gut. But there's equal importance, I think, to keeping your eyes and ears open, and understanding that no matter how firm your convictions, that there's at least a 10% in there, and it's probably more like 80%, of open door that the universe is going to bring you and say, you know, I like what you're doing, but actually I think I might look at it this way. The old saying that did not originally
thought of?
Life is what happens when you're making other plans. Sorry?
I mean, my thing is, you know, I would say, have you thought of doing it this way? Or, ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that, or, guess what? I'm pulling the rug out from under your feet. Let me tell you,
yes.
I had a plan. My plan was to carve out a career as a Hollywood screenwriter. That's what I was doing in 2004, 2005, 2006, and that was what I was doing. When Bob Burg came to me and said, would you write this book with me? I was like, I did not have time for that annoyance, for that distraction. Bob was a distraction, and in fact, what Bob turns out really was he was bringing me my next career. I just didn't know it.
Yep. That's funny. Well, you know, it's interesting because all of these movies really, not movies, all of these books could really become movies.
I said that last week, didn't I? Or 2 weeks ago when we talked.
Yeah, because
when's the movie? That book, the recipe, needs to be a movie!
Yeah.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's and actually the Go-Giver too. I'm actually surprised that you guys haven't done a Go-Giver movie yet because the stories are quick moving. They're simple in the story in terms of how it gets you there. It's not, and I think that's the beauty of it. It doesn't take you in all these millions corners and just try to insult your intelligence by saying, look how much smarter we are. They're down to earth, great books. And boy, they would make great movie scripts. I don't know if you ever had that in mind when you were writing them, but they just feel that way. So I think they all make very natural movies, and the recipe would make a great movie.
The recipe just hit out at me as being, this must be a movie. Because I could see so many, not only young people seeing it and thinking, oh, yeah, I get that, but also parents thinking, oh, or aunts and uncles thinking, yeah, that's my kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, or even that's me.
That too.
Yeah, or even that's me, or that's been me.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's really, I think that the lessons, you know, and it's a delicate line in a book like that, and the same thing is true of the Go-Giver, really, and the Go-Giver Leader. It's a delicate line between the people and the story on the one hand, and the principles on the other hand. It's this thing where, you know, a lot of people don't like parables. I've had a lot of people in business school say, I hate parables, and the reason they hate parables is that there are so many written that are a little dull. And I know how that happens. It happens when you start out with these things you want to teach. It's like giving a talk. And so you write a story to demonstrate these things you want to teach, but really it's all about the things you want to teach. And it feels like a lecture. What you have to, in my opinion, what you have to do when you write a parable or a fable or a compelling story is you have to set up your situation, and then you have to let the story just tell itself. It has to be about the characters. It has to be about the people, or more specifically, about the human experience of it. It has to be about the feelings and the drama and the interaction, because that's what's real. And the principles and the rules, the laws and so forth have to come out of that and reflect that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you succeed beautifully, because all of that is woven into the story, but in such a natural way.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's not, let's go from parable to now, here's a bulleted list of the 7 key points. No, each point just sort of appears when it needs to, and it gets talked about. And then at the end you have like the lists, or you make an addendum, but throughout the story they just organically morph into knowledge. And that's one of the things I love about it. It's never forced on you. It just sort of happens.
So I think that the considered life, the examined life, happens that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's for me.
Yeah,
Things happen. I didn't plan, but then you deal with your situations, and then sort of out of that, you gradually sort of pull some general principles that help make sense out of it. And that's, I think that's, a story should be like life in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does, because, you know, you can know something very, very well, and yet one day after knowing it maybe 20, 30 years, you realize, oh wait, I don't know that. I didn't think about that one little thing. I've been teaching martial arts.
I got it wrong.
Yeah, for example, I've been involved in martial arts for about 50-something years. And I teach different martial arts, and especially Tai Chi as I've gotten older, Tai Chi Chuan. I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I learned my first Tai Chi form when I was about 18. I had no appreciation for it. It was fun, but it was slow. I was young. I had energy. I wanted to kick. And as I got older, literally every day I practice, something is slightly different. Something feels different. Something moves different. Something aligns differently. And every day it's like, gee, I missed that. And every day you have a new experience, and that's the same with life, like you said. In writing, all of the things that you write are really how we grow organically in life. We proceed. Sometimes we think we're really smart at something, realize how dumb we are at something, or how much smarter somebody else is at something. And next thing you know, you've learned a lesson. And that lesson was very naturally done, whether it's a whack on the head or it's just a point somebody makes. You go, okay, that makes sense. And that's where I think the parables that you guys have written, and in particular you, because I think you're the storyteller among them, they're beautiful. I just really enjoy the approach you take. And, it's like, I don't know, when you were a kid, I used to read the Hardy Boy novels. And all the girls I knew read the Nancy Drew novel. But the Hardy Boys, they were great mysteries. But as a kid...
In the UK, it was E. Nesbit, or, it was English authors.
Okay, but
famous five.
Yeah, and it was people you felt like you could be, and you wanted to be as part of that. And your stories are very similar to that in terms of you're engaged in it. You're part of the story. In other words, when you're a reader, you're not just reading. You're kind of part of that story, and that's what I really enjoy, the being part of the story. And as we're going through the story, learning with the protagonists or whoever we're following at that moment, what they're learning.
So where do the parables come from? Where does that idea come from then, John? Because I really like it, and it's I'm not particularly religious. I was brought up going to Sunday school and going to church, and we were always taught parables. That was the way that when I was young, certainly with the church, it was all parables. It was all, you look at one thing and it teaches you about something else, and you look at this and it teaches you about something else. But it seems to have fallen slightly out of fashion. And yet, your book, The Recipe, to me, contains, the parable is fantastic, and yet it's so up to date.
I think that parables, when you say it's gone out of fashion a bit, you're absolutely right. And I think these things do go in waves, in a very small way. Who Moved My Cheese was gigantic in the 90s, and The 1 Minute Manager was huge in the 80s, and that book inspired me. And when I first wrote The Go-Giver with Bob, I had read maybe 2 parables. I wasn't steeped in that literature. I only began to realize after The Go-Giver came out how many parables there are out there. Eventually read The Richest Man in Babylon, and The Greatest Salesman in the World, and The Alchemist, which is sort of a much more novelized kind of parable. And there's some great classics out there, but just thousands of others that are. But yes, maybe out of fashion a bit, but storytelling never goes out of fashion, and never has. And I think that I was not steeped in parables per se. But my mom was a storyteller. She was a teacher, a 5th grade teacher, a middle school teacher. She taught Greek mythology, and we went to Greece twice together with a group of my classmates. And so I grew up hearing Greek myths from her. And then in my youth, and by youth I mean my 20s and 30s, I did a lot of speaking, a lot of public speaking in various contexts, and really from the age of 16 or 17 on, I was doing a lot of public speaking. And public speaking only works, no matter what it is you're there to tell, or there to convey. It only works if you make your talk a string of beads, and those beads are all stories. Every public speaker knows that the strength of your point, of your message, is going to be carried on the backs of these little stories that you lace through as examples.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe that was, both my mom's Greek myths and also the public speaking experience. But, again, part of it was the music background. When Bob came and said he had this idea for a story, I didn't know how to write parables, but it just seemed like a natural thing to do. And what I have discovered since is that I've written big books, like this book, The Killing School, is the biggest book I've ever written. It's gigantic. It's 130,000 words or something like that. And I can do those books and memoirs that are thick. But what I love most, what I have the most personal passion for, is writing these little stories that have an idea to convey, but they have a real human experience in them. They're not, they're not two-dimensional. They're real. The only way, you said that you get involved with a story, you feel like you're learning as the character goes. The only way that can happen is if the writer has that experience. You said you teared up when you wrote the book. I can't get through the book without tearing up. I was crying as I wrote some of those passages.
Yeah.
You have to, it's a little bit like acting. You have to actually get in there and be in the story while you write. Otherwise, it's not going to move a reader at all.
No.
That's true of a blog post.
That's really interesting what you're saying, John, because my mother was also into Greek mythology, and she brought me up with mythology. And she gave me a book when I was about 7 years old. So that book is now over 50 years old. Yes. And then I gave it, when my daughter got to about 7 or 8, I gave it to my daughter to read. And she absolutely loved it. And then began to follow Greek mythology. And then went on to study classical civilizations in school and then at university, and is now a primary school teacher where part of the core of her teaching is storytelling.
Yeah. I mentioned I was at Chef Charles's house last week. I flew to Houston to spend a couple of days there where Charles and I were going to do a video shoot, a couple of video shoots actually. We created some video content to package together as bonuses for people who pre-order the book. So we did one video shoot. This is going to tie back to what you just said, believe it or not. So we did a series of Charles cooking the recipes in the book, and the two of us talking as he cooked, and then he would feed them to me. And I did, in fact, make him cook the omelet blindfolded. And he didn't do bad. He did not burn himself or cut himself. It was great. And we did an interview, a sit-down interview. While in that process, his daughter, I don't know her age, but she's in her 20s, young thing. She was barely out of the house. His daughter, Kelsey, was there, and she did some cooking on camera, and she was part of the thing. And she was... over the course of the 2 days, she did a series of Facebook Live shots where she was doing video taping, if you will, video live, it's video streaming, what was going on about it. And her little Facebook Live video streams were more polished, more delightful, more compelling, more effective, just in every way more just classy than, 8 out of 10 professional productions would have been.
Yeah.
And you know what she does? She's a first grade teacher. I mean, she's a teacher.
Yeah.
So she is a natural storyteller. And, storytelling is, I think, probably, the most time-honored of human professions. It comes into play everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah, that's a really
good point. Do you think it's important, then, this is a bit off learning, a bit philosophical, but do you think it's then important that people, that parents, when they have children, introduce books, or if they, even if they have, some parents are not particularly good at reading, but maybe they tell stories about their parents or their childhood or their grandparents, and that then helps give a background to kids when they're growing up, and helps then maybe inform them as they get older, and builds a skill of storytelling.
I can't think of anything more important. I can't think of, well, yes, I can. Probably two things. One is keeping them alive and loving them. Those are important. Michael J. Fox says that the secrets to great parenthood are love them, feed them, keep them out of traffic. That's good.
That's true.
His secret to a good marriage, by the way, is to keep the fights clean and the sex dirty. But I think the parenting advice is good, but I would add to that, tell them stories. And I do think reading books to kids is one of the very, very best things you can possibly do to grow their brains, to grow their minds. And it does literally grow the brain and grows the connections in the brain and the folds in the brain. But whether it's out of books or it's, as you say, telling stories of your parents or of your family or whatever, so critically important. There's a point in the recipe where Owen is telling his mom, it's a little thing, but when he comes home from the diner, there's something his mom says to him when she comes home from work, when she meets him. She says, tell me everything. Mm-hmm. And I love that about her, because it's you can tell this woman just adores her boy.
Yeah.
But she wants him to tell her everything. And he does. And there are a few points where you get a glimpse of some of the things he tells her, and he makes her laugh so hard she spits wine through her nose. And it's pretty funny. He's pretty. You can tell just from that he's a good storyteller. So yeah, I think that's a critically important thing.
It is. But it's interesting, because in today's day and age, reading is on the decline, which is sort of a shame, a big shame.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think so at all. I think it's the opposite. I think that it's actually on the increase. And I think there are many manifestations of that. One of them is the Harry Potter phenomenon. Harry Potter was not only a publishing phenomenon, it was a reading phenomenon at very, very young age levels. One of the fastest growing book segments right now is YA novels, young adult novels. We have a YA version. My first book I wrote with Brendan Webb, my Navy SEAL sniper friend, it was his memoir. It's called The Red Circle. It's kind of named after that circle in his scope. Mm-hmm. And he forgets everything about the rest of the world and just what's in that scope. Mm-hmm. But it's a metaphor for knowing what's important in your life and focusing on that. And there's a YA edition out of The Red Circle. So YA is huge. The book, is it not Unbreakable, Unbeaten? The story of Louis Zamperini, who was the Olympian runner, and I keep forgetting the name of that book.
It was Unsomething. I know what you're talking about. What was it?
There's Unsuppressible. Anyway, that book, the author herself wrote the YA version. It took her like 2 or 3 years to do. She put so much time into it because it was so important to her and to the readership. I think that with email and texting, that is actually, in a weird way, I think is making children more literate, not less literate. Yeah, it degrades grammatical sense in some ways, but that's been around forever. The advances in language have always been degrading grammatical sense and making room for the new, the same way that old plant matter breaks down and makes fertile soil.
Right.
But I think that reading is actually healthier right now than it's been in generations.
Now, it's interesting. I talked to somebody at one of the Barnes & Nobles that's not too far from us, and it's a pretty big one. And I was asking, who's reading? Because I always see the same groups at the Barnes & Noble. Kids and older adults, and almost nothing in between. And they were saying, we see a lot of kids up to about 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Then they start fading out a little bit. Then we see people 40s and 50s and over, but there's not much in the 20-something to 40-something range. That's what they see, at least. And keep in mind, I live in California, which is where the brain drain is occurring at the moment. So it could have an impact on it. But it is interesting that their view was that in the middle, nobody's reading as much, but they're reading a lot at the beginning and at the later stages of life, which it's better than nothing. It's good.
Maybe at the stage you're talking about, because certainly the decorator is coming around to do my house at the moment is 23, 24.
Okay.
And he loves books, but he hasn't the time to sit and read them. So what he does, he listens to audiobooks constantly.
Right.
So it's not, he's not taking in, he's not experiencing reading, he's just not experiencing it in the way that maybe you and I would have done, Rick and John. It's audiobooks, but it's still storytelling. And in some ways, the power of the voice can actually, in some ways, it takes away, because if it's in your own head when you're reading, you tend to make up things, as opposed to somebody who's reading it to you. But I still think it's important.
Well, actually, I'll tell you, I didn't read the book on the recipe. I listened to it. I put it on my Kindle. I put it on my Kindle, and that way I could work, I could do other things. But it's funny, even though I wasn't reading it, I wasn't really working that much either. I was just listening to the book going, this is good. And occasionally I'd maybe turn it and look at something, but I was really more focused on the book. And I listened to the book over about a day and a half. You know, it was probably 6 hours, five hours or so to read the whole book or to listen to the whole book. And so I totally agree with you that listening or reading, they're both, I mean, as far as senses go, we perceive it the same way.
Audiobooks is also, right now, one of the fastest growing segments. E-books have slowed a bit in the marketplace. Print books are still doing fine, but audiobooks has been a boom now for several years, and is currently a boom. In the Go-Giver books, which Bob and I actually did the reading for those books, which was a blast, all the Go-Giver books. We have a new Go-Giver book, actually, which you probably know, coming out next spring. We're going to be doing a reading of that this December. And the recipe is coming out in audiobook also, and I just finished doing all the reading in the studio. I read that myself, the recipe. And reading it out loud was wonderful. I love audiobooks. And I know what you're saying about how when you read it on the page, you make things up in your head. It's kind of like seeing a movie version of something fills in all these blanks where, you know, when you read it without a movie, then you just imagine what the person looks like. That said, I think audiobooks are fantastic. I love audiobooks. Because my earliest memories of stories are being told to me before I could read. And I think that there's something about the auditory sense that, as Marshall McLuhan used to talk about this back in the 60s and 70s. The auditory sense is very involving. And it's, you know, goes back to campfires and caves. So, yeah, I love, and back to your point about young people and old people in Barnes & Noble, let's not forget where that information is coming from. Barnes & Noble,
That's true.
As an institution, as a physical storefront, is a place that it's great to bring kids there. They have a beautiful kids section in every Barnes & Noble store. Old people have more time probably to go there. People who are in their 30s and 40s, kind of at the intense point of their careers, as you said, Lesley, maybe they don't have time to do that, but they're buying it they're buying it on Amazon or bn.com or wherever, and they're listening to it in audiobook. So I think that, you know, I think reading is thriving.
Sorry, John, another question for you. So obviously, I'm into learning, and you know, we're in eLearnChat. So how do you think learning people who work in learning and development, in leadership, can effectively use storytelling to help improve, whether it be individual performance in the organization or organizational performance? Do you think storytelling has a part to play?
You know, in a sort of literal sense, sure. In the sense of, you know, if you are a manager of a department or a CEO or an executive vice president of a division or of a company or whatever, you're in whatever kind of leadership position with other people, you know, certainly you may be in situations where you're addressing a group. And in that case, it's kind of like public speaking, of course, using stories to illustrate, blah, blah. It's obviously very important. But I think that you know, a lot of people who use books like, one reason that a book like The Go-Giver is so popular, and it's not just that. I mean, Our Iceberg is Melting, and Who Moved My Cheese, and there are many, many other books that are like that. They're short, in parable format that have been used in great numbers in the business world. One reason for their popularity in that context is that often in business world you got people who feel like they're too busy to read. You get a lot of readers who I hardly ever finish a book. I just don't have time. But I sat down and read your book in a sit-up or 2 seconds or over the weekend or what have you. I think that stories like ours can be very useful tools in a business setting to enhance the building of a culture in the business. Every business needs to have its culture built, or for the development of that culture, the training of certain things. I mean, as I said, my friend Chef Charles was using the Go-Giver with his 750-member team at the country club. There was a mayor of Longview, Texas, started a mayor's book club, and the Go-Giver was his first book. So he studied that book with the whole city, which I thought was a really innovative way of being a mayor. I love that.
Yep.
I wish more mayors did that. So yeah, I think both in the literal sense of being the person telling stories and using stories to illustrate points you want to teach to your people, but also of actually using the published books as tools for culture building in a business. I think they're fantastic.
That's very true. And you know what, John? We are at the end of our time. We can go on for a long time. And they always accuse us we talk too much. But this has been pleasant. It's very, very pleasant, very pleasurable to actually meet you and talk about how you develop your books and all the things you've done with the parables. And I did find it interesting how you've never really been a parable writer until you started writing one. I think that's how it works, isn't it?
It's funny. Most of what I read, one thing, I never get writer's block. And the reason I never get writer's block is that when I do, I put down what I'm doing and I read. I go read. That always cures writer's block. It's like breathing out and breathing in. You can't breathe out forever without some breathing in.
Yep.
So I read a lot, and I love reading. Mostly what I read, 95%, 98%, is fiction. Okay. I read mystery novels. I read great classic novels. I read novels. I read fiction. Yeah. It's not what I write. So I don't read the things I write, but I read great writing. And I think that's you don't have to read in the genre that you want to work in. The same thing is true if you're in business. You don't have to just read business books for them to have an impact on the way you conduct business. You can learn great things from Neil Gaiman, as well as from Seth Godin, from Kate Atkinson, as well as from John Maxwell. It's all codified human experience that nourishes your brain.
And Harry Potter.
And Harry Potter. And the Narnia books. The whole gamut.
Yeah, Philip Pullman.
Edith Nesbit.
Yeah.
Yep. So the recipe is coming out in October, correct?
October 17th.
October 17th, and I will have my pre-orders ready. I've got gifts already in mind for a lot of people. So
all right.
There's a cook, not a cook. He's a business owner. He's a restaurateur who's about 2 blocks from where we are now. He's an Italian guy, great guy. We interviewed him about less than a year ago. I've known him for 30 years since we've been out in this area. And he follows the same principles of putting love into your food, love into the restaurant. When you walk in, you feel like you're part of the family. Yeah, every time we walk in, it's a hug, you get a kiss, and it's like, hey, Italiano. And he's like that. And very successful restaurant, and people love going there for business. Because it's a place you can talk for hours, and the food comes out of the place it's always good. It's rare to have a meal that's not good there. That's almost always 100% great. And again, that's and I told him about the book I had just read, and he went, "Oh, I want to read it." I go, soon, I'll give you a copy. And he's like, "Oh, great, I want to read that. It sounds wonderful." He immediately took to the idea of the boy and the cook. He says, and he's done that in his life where he has now a couple of guys that were busboys years ago who pretty much run the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. I see that and I go, man, I love that. It's, that you can bring the future, you look at the future as you're working with them. This is the future. They'll be there when you're not. Or when he's not there, he knows he's got people who can run it. And that's just wonderful.
It's like the student that ended up buying my house.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk, huh?
Every great cook knows about the power of a great mentor.
It's so true. And that's in everything, I think. You find people, I remember when I was learning programming, not learning, I was already working in the field, but I finished a program and I just sort of sat back at my desk going, did it. Good, great, smug. And then my manager goes, hey, do you know how to do this? No. He throws this big 500-page manual at me and goes, and figure it out. It's like, got it. Okay, got it. It's how easy how we can get.
That's when you learn to read.
Oh, yeah. And I was a reader my whole life, but he just basically threw that 500-page manual and said, well, you don't know it all, do you? No, read. So it was good. It was an experience.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, hey, we really appreciate having you on today. We look forward to maybe having you on another day or on another show because I think what you do is great. Really, really do. I don't change from my emails to personal. I just love what you guys have done, and it's always, there's a new book by them. Great. It's like I'm there. It's wonderful. So we
appreciate you, John. Albeit virtually.
It's a pleasure. It is a pleasure to speak with both of you. Rick, I've so appreciated your emails, and you've said such kind things about the book, and I appreciate your insights too. It's not just kind things; it's insightful things, and I love that. So thank you both very much.
You're more than welcome, and you're funny in emails too. You've got a great sense of humor, so.
Gotta have fun.
Yeah, you do. Life's way too short.
You need to do when you have an email correspondence with you, Rick.
That's true. Anyway, we'll have a great one, John. Good luck on the book. October 17th. Be ready for it. It's really a wonderful book, The Recipe.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time. Lesley, we'll see you next week. Have a great one, everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Take care.